My son looked straight at me and said, "You're a failure," not in anger, in certainty. Years of sacrifice erased in one sentence. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just nodded. Because he thought he knew my story, but he had no idea what I was about to do next. I'm 65 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that being a good father meant putting your head down and doing whatever it took to keep your family steady. I wasn't a businessman, not a man with titles or applause. I worked with my hands, long shifts, early mornings, late nights. My clothes smelled like sweat and dust, and my back carried years no one could see. But my son? He never went hungry, he never missed school. He had shoes when he needed them, books when he asked, and a roof that never once failed him. I thought that was enough. I thought that was what mattered. When he was younger, he used to wait for me at the door. I remember his small hands grabbing my arm, asking me about my day even though he didn't understand half of what I said. Back then, I was his hero. But time changes things. As he grew older, his world expanded, and mine stayed the same. He went to college, met people who talked about investments, startups, vacations abroad. He started to see life differently. And slowly, I noticed the way he looked at me began to change. At first, it was subtle. A sigh when I didn't understand something about technology. A small laugh when I mispronounced a word. Then it became sharper. "You wouldn't get it, Dad," he'd say, brushing me off. I told myself it was normal. Kids outgrow their parents in certain ways. I didn't take it personally, or at least, I tried not to. But then came the comparisons. He'd talk about his friends' fathers, men who owned businesses, drove expensive cars, wore suits that fit perfectly. "They built something," he said once, not even looking at me. "They didn't just survive." I felt that sentence settle somewhere deep inside me, but I stayed quiet. I reminded myself that he was young, that he didn't understand what it took to just survive. As his career took off, the distance between us grew wider. He moved into a better neighborhood, started earning more in a month than I did in a year. He visited less often. And when he did, it felt like he was somewhere else entirely, checking his phone, distracted, impatient. I noticed how he avoided introducing me to certain people. How his tone changed when others were around, like he was trying to separate himself from me. Still, I kept showing up. I called him. I asked about his work. I told him I was proud of him, even when he didn't say the same back. Because that's what a father does, right? He stands there, even when the ground beneath him starts to crack. The night everything broke was supposed to be a simple family dinner. Nothing fancy, just a small gathering. He arrived late, as usual, dressed sharply, confident, carrying that energy of someone who believes they've made it. At first, things were normal. Conversations, small laughs. But then the topic shifted. Success, ambition, choices. Someone asked him what motivated him, and he leaned back in his chair, glanced at me for just a second and said, "Honestly, seeing what happens when you don't aim higher." There was a pause, a strange silence that crept into the room. He continued, "I mean, look at my dad. No offense, but I didn't want that life." It felt like the air had been pulled out of my chest, but he wasn't done. He looked straight at me then, no hesitation, no softness. "You're a good man, Dad, but you're a failure. You never achieved anything." No one spoke. No one moved. All eyes were on me, waiting for something, anger, denial, anything, and for a moment I felt it all rising inside me. The years, the sacrifices, the quiet nights, the things I gave up so he could stand where he was. I could have listed them all. I could have defended myself. But instead, I just looked at him and said, calmly, "Maybe you're right." I saw the surprise flicker across his face. Maybe he expected a fight, but I didn't give him one. I didn't give anyone one. I finished my meal quietly, excused myself early, and went home. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, replaying his words over and over again. "You're a failure." It hurt more than anything else ever had. Not because it was cruel, but because it came from him. But somewhere in that pain, something else began to form. Not anger, not revenge in the way people usually think of it, but clarity. For the first time in years, I stopped asking myself what I owed him. Instead, I asked what I owed myself. The next morning, I started making decisions. Quiet ones. I reviewed things I hadn't looked at in a long time, my savings, small investments I'd built slowly over decades, things I never talked about because I never felt the need to prove anything. I realized I had more control over my life than I'd allowed myself to believe. I began to let go, not dramatically, not loudly. I canceled things that tied me down. I sold what I didn't need. I packed only what mattered. There was no announcement, no confrontation, just action. I wrote him a letter. Not long, not emotional, just honest. I told him that maybe he was right. I hadn't chased the kind of success he admired, but I had built a life rooted in something else, and now I was choosing to live the rest of it on my own terms. Then I left. No forwarding address, no explanation beyond that letter, just absence. Days passed. I imagine at first, he didn't think much of it. Maybe he assumed I needed space. But then the calls started. 1, then 3, then 10. Messages, questions, confusion turning into worry. By the 9th day, there were 22 missed calls. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because for once, I wanted him to sit with something he couldn't control, to feel the weight of silence. The same silence I had carried for years. Eventually, he found the letter again. Read it differently this time. Not as a defense, but as a truth he hadn't been ready to see. He began to understand that success isn't always loud, that achievement doesn't always come with recognition, and that the foundation he stood on had been built quietly, without applause. When we finally spoke again, his voice wasn't the same. The certainty was gone, replaced by something softer, something uncertain. He didn't call me a failure that time. He didn't call me anything at all. He just said, "Dad, I didn't know." And that was enough. Because sometimes the greatest lessons a person can learn doesn't come from being told they're wrong. It comes from being left alone with the consequences of what they believed was right. People think success is loud. They picture big houses, expensive cars, applause, recognition. They think it's something you can point at and measure. But what they don't see are the quiet lives that hold everything together. The sacrifices no one applauds, the nights no one remembers, the choices made not for glory, but for someone else's future. I used to believe that if I just kept giving, kept showing up, one day it would be understood without needing to be explained. I was wrong. Some lessons don't come from presence, they come from absence. When my son called me a failure, it wasn't just an insult, it was a reflection of how he had come to see the world. In his eyes, value came from visible success, and maybe that's not entirely his fault. The world teaches us that. It rewards what shines and ignores what quietly endures. But what he didn't understand then is that everything he had, everything he became, stood on years of invisible effort. Effort that didn't look impressive, didn't sound inspiring, but was necessary. And the truth is, many people don't realize that until it's too late. Silence is a powerful teacher. When I chose not to argue, not to defend myself, it wasn't weakness. It was the hardest decision I ever made. Because sometimes, explaining your worth to someone who has already decided it doesn't exist only diminishes you further. Walking away doesn't mean you accept their judgment, it means you refuse to live under it. And in that space, in that distance, something changes, not just in them, but in you. My leaving wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't want to hurt him the way he hurt me. I wanted him to feel the absence of something he had taken for granted. I wanted him to confront a truth no one else could explain to him. And when he finally did, when his voice changed, when certainty turned into regret, that's when the lesson reached him. Not through my words, but through his own realization. Respect is a fragile thing. It doesn't come from fear and it doesn't come from obligation, it grows from understanding. And once it's lost, it's not easily rebuilt. That's why it's so important to recognize the value of people while they're still there, while they're still showing up for you even in ways you don't fully see. Because one day they might stop, not out of anger, but out of clarity. If you're watching this, take a moment and think about the people in your life who have been quietly standing behind you. The ones who never demanded recognition, who never listed their sacrifices, who simply did what needed to be done. Ask yourself, have you ever overlooked them? Have you ever measured their worth using the wrong scale? And if you have, it's not too late to change that. Pick up the phone, have the conversation. Say the words you've been postponing. Because not every story ends with a second chance, not every silence gets broken. And if you've ever been in my place, if you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or made to feel like your efforts didn't matter, remember this, your value doesn't decrease someone fails to see it. You don't need to prove your worth to those who have already chosen not to recognize it. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is step back and let life reveal the truth in its own time. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it will open their eyes before it's too late. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? Would you have spoken up or walked away in silence?